Hi there, I'm Mary Sebecki. I'm with the Need More Fund in Toledo, Ohio, and I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of the Ohio Grantmakers Forum. And I am joined here today by Michelle Mills, who is President and CEO of St. Stephen's Community House here in Columbus, Ohio. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us here today.
Oh, absolutely.
Wanted to have a conversation about how things are going for you there at St. Stephen's. Can you tell me a little bit about your operations? Let's go back, say, prior to 2008. What was the climate at St. Stephen's looking like? How were you doing financially and as an organization?
St. Stephen's was continuing to be very mission focused in the programs and services that we offer, continued to be very focused on what the residents and the particular neighborhood, because our services are neighborhood and community based, what their needs were, and continue that as we have throughout our 90-year history. So 2006, 2007, we were experiencing leadership transition. I had just started taking the helm of St. Stephen's after a director who had spent 51 valuable years with St. Stephen's. And so the climate, as you can imagine, was probably very much what it had been for the past 20 years of when my predecessor served as the executive director of St. Stephen's Community House. And so we're just at the crux of many other environmental changes that were happening with funders, and a lot of the impacts really started going around the 2006-2007 fiscal year for us, and really had to have some difficult conversations related to programs and services that had a 30 or better long history with the organization, and how that will look as we move forward with a lot of the environmental changes that were impacting St. Stephen's Community House.
Okay, and then 2008 happens.
Yes.
What happened after that?
2008, I like to call that my pension year, because I, along with probably many other nonprofits and many other organizations who were finding their way out of defined benefits plans. So I would say that probably is what led a lot of the financial impact for St. Stephen's, and really trying to settle what a defined benefits plan meant to a nonprofit who could not sustain defined levels of retirement for past employees, current employees, and the like. And so not being sure of what our day-to-day finances and revenues could look like, we certainly couldn't make any promises about 20 or 30 years later when folks decided to retire. So I would say if I had one word to describe that beginning of 2008, I would talk pension.
Okay.
And so that sort of led the catalyst to really start uncovering a lot of what we consider expenses and what are core operational needs of the organization, along with what is core to our mission in terms of programs and services.
Okay, so you were already looking at the expense side of your budget.
Absolutely.
And costs. And then what happened in terms of the revenue streams or the income for your organization, particularly at the end of 2008 and in the year following? What hits did you take in terms of funding sources, things like that?
Well, I would say our biggest dive was in government support.
Okay.
And so that's where it really started turning downward. But I don't know if that was necessarily bad for us. It really, again, gave us the opportunity to look at what is core, and what if it was our dollars versus the government's dollars or foundation dollars, United Way's dollars. What will we stay committed to? What is core services? And that led to the conversation of there are no sacred cows when you get into challenges in terms of revenue and challenge times in the economic downturn. You start looking, there are no sacred cows, and that means that, you know, nothing is beyond what we can make changes to, and really thinking out of the box and what's going to be 5 years down the road. How do we strategically plan for that? How do we diversify our funding? What is fundraising? Is fundraising cost saving, gaining efficiency, or is fundraising going out and strategically looking at bigger and better partners? And so we decided that what it meant was both. It meant that we had to take a look at expenses. We had to take a look at how we leverage revenue, who are we partnering with, and who's going to be that partner 5 years from today. And what services are really core to our mission, and what do we commit our own resources and our energy to, and what's going to improve our community.
You already touched on the next question that I was going to ask you in terms of the services, the demand for services. Did you see at that point in time that obviously the clients you serve, the folks you work with, were probably experiencing financial hardships of their own. Did you see a real uptake in requests for service or demand? And how did that factor in and drive some of your thinking too?
That's a great question, because it absolutely was a major factor. When you talk basic needs, we talk about family stabilization, but families can't be stable if they don't have their basic needs. Our uptick in basic needs was somewhere around 12% in the beginning of 2008.
Oh my.
And that for us, in a pure number sense, is going from maybe serving 900 households to serving 1,200 households a month in our food pantry. So that's one area where we saw a hit. The other impact of that was that they were first-time users of our services. So that gave an opportunity for people to understand what is the value of St. Stephen's. So we didn't just see it as a challenge. We saw it as an opportunity to educate the public and give the awareness of who's really hungry in our city. Because I think that there was some education opportunities needed for funders. That is not the same people that they thought 10 years ago, or as old as the research is the day that you started, that the same numbers that was in the research 2 years ago are not the same statistics that we're facing today. So we saw it as an opportunity to educate the public and as well as funders about what are those challenges and who are we really supporting and helping. And so it was a challenging time, but it was also an opportunity as well. And we did see an uptick in terms of needs when it comes to many of our programs, particularly basic needs.
Yeah. So you were out there and you were looking at your program, revising things to find out how you could best meet this demand for service and help those folks in need. Who did you turn to for help?
Who did I turn to for help? It was called the Board of Trustees. Well, for me, having the experience in looking at national impacts and what happens in other communities, having a base of folks from the United Neighborhood Centers of America, of colleagues that were facing some of these same challenges, some who had been on the curve of making changes, opening charter schools, different ways of doing work and bettering their community, whether it was a core service they had had for 20 or 30 years or whether it was a new service. So I would say that my base of colleagues came from my work with United Neighborhood Centers of America, which is a base of colleagues that operate settlement houses similar to St. Stephen's. So size and scope, there's a lot of pieces that were the same. Neighborhoods are pretty much the same. They're the most vulnerable neighborhoods in this country that settlement houses are located in. And so we had a lot of common ground of which I could learn from. And again, as I jokingly mentioned, but very seriously talked about our Board of Trustees and really bringing them along, because many of them are second, third generation board members of the organization, and really understanding what they had did and what their parents had really supported, whether it was a child care center and how that looked, that maybe we can't sustain that. Maybe it's not as necessary to the families as it was 20 years ago. So maybe we keep child care, but maybe we shift in how we deliver that particular service of early care education.
What about funders?
Oh,
did we help? Did we hurt? What?
Funders are always helpful, and particularly when they're faced with making decisions on research and making decisions on what they hear in the ground. And so they find themselves in quite a quandary. You know, research is showing that we really need to take our dollars and focus on childhood obesity. And our funding community, the nonprofits, are saying, gee, I can't feed families, let alone feeding them to make challenges about their choices. So how do we make the marriage of what they see in the research is saying, then where they should take their dollars and what we see on a day-to-day basis and make a win out of that? And so I would say that they were listening, because it was very contrary probably to a lot of what research was saying dollars should be spent on. When you take a look at children's reports that come out every year, the Annie Casey Foundation's and their report on kids data book, which talks about what looks like on a national level, what's impacting our state, our city. That's one bit of information. The other bit of information is what is actually happening in the trenches with the nonprofits themselves. And so turning to the funding community to make a match of those two driving resources was a challenge, but it was something that gave us all an opportunity to learn and grow.
And so when perhaps a foundation was embarking on an initiative or making suggestions, you were able to say, well, whoa, wait a minute, that's a great idea, but right now it's not feasible for us to really pursue that. So you found that they were receptive to maybe revising some of their initiatives or plans to better respond to the reality of what you were dealing with in the street?
Absolutely. Dialogue was critical, and I'll take our Choice Pantry as an example of that. So when you think about changing behavior and thinking about choices and food choices, and you think about us saying, well, we need to feed more people, a Choice Pantry is a healthy mix of that. A Choice Pantry allows for choices to be made and education to occur, while at the same time making sure families have food to eat.
Right.
And so having courageous partners like our community foundation that would invest in an entity like that, a Cardinal Health or corporate citizen that says health is our focus, let us think through that. Yeah, we see childhood obesity as an issue. You see feeding families and getting food on their table as a challenge. What is a marriage of that? And our Choice Pantry was a marriage of that. So 2 days a week we started offering a Choice Pantry, which was the education side of addressing food challenges in terms of choices for children and families. The pantry side of the work could continue so we could serve the mass numbers of families we were receiving, and also making sure we're meeting religious needs, cultural needs, and dietary needs through our Choice Pantry and what we had to offer on regular pantry days. So that is a great example of here's an initiative that funders feel very strong about and what we see in the trenches as a need. It was a good, healthy marriage that way.
Okay. Let me ask you about where we're at right now. And as you look into the coming year, of course, state budget cuts, lots of cuts from different areas are projected and probably most likely will be coming at us. Where does this leave your organization at this point in time? How, as you look out to 2012, what are you thinking or seeing?
It continues the dialogue of there are no sacred cows. We have to stay close in linking mission and money.
And what, in this situation, would you think would be the one message that funders need to hear from nonprofit organizations?
Let's talk about it.
Okay. Well, that's short and sweet and simple. All right, great.
All right.
Well, I think that concludes our time together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.